Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to Act 3. It is another spectacular day in Nanaimo. And how lucky are we that our guest today is an absolute expert when it comes to brain injury. Kix Citton. I said it wrong, but you know what? I know I'm going to say it wrong. And anybody who listens to this show knows I always say the last name wrong.
Thanks so much, Kathy. Love being on your show. And you got it right. Kix Citton, you did it.
Oh, I did. That's so amazing. It truly is my thing. Every interviewer has their own special piece, right? Mine is screwing up people's names, whether I'm doing it on television, whether I'm doing it on the radio. I don't know what happens, but I'm glad I got it right. Tell us a little bit about who and what Nanaimo Brain Injury does and what you do.
So Nanaimo Brain Injury Society has been in Nanaimo serving people affected by acquired brain injury. That includes individuals and caregivers, family members, as well as our entire community, service providers, the public. We offer education pieces. We've been doing this for over 30 years now as a local grassroots community organization. I have the privilege of being the executive director of this lovely, small but mighty organization. And we support people by offering direct services, individual referrals to education, information. We also have in-house programs where people can learn the skills and strategies needed for recovery and community reintegration after a brain injury. And we also do great education, free education sessions for clients and caregivers, everything from financial planning, getting your financial house in order after a brain injury, what happens, to yoga, how do you take care of yourself, how do you take care of your body. So we look at the different aspects of health and wellness, and we try to meet those needs through our education. We have our Concussion 101 program in the schools where we're doing some prevention work. And we also have a wonderful volunteer program where people with experience with brain injury can come back and give back so that they can connect with people who are newly affected and offer those messages of hope and inspiration simply by showing them that there is life after brain injury. And so we're a very dynamic little organization, and I like to say that we're a small organization with big ideas, and we have a wonderful community that supports us every step of the way.
Well, indeed, you are a mighty organization. There's no question about that. And you're quite right. Sometimes some of the most dynamic organizations have more behind the doors than people get a chance to see. And it sounds like you have a lot of that. And let's unpack some of that as we go through today's conversation. But before we actually do that, I think that one of the things that's the misconception when it comes to brain injury is that it's people can't see it the same way you can see a broken arm or a broken leg. And therefore, there is an assumption that a person is absolutely okay when they may not be. And I just wonder if you could help us sort of explore, what that might look like for someone who has a brain injury and how we can educate the public right from the get-go that there are people in our community that may look absolutely fine, but could have some real cognitive impediments.
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. So we're here in Brain Injury Awareness Month, June, so I'm so thrilled to have this conversation with you. And it's true, brain injury can happen to anyone, anywhere, at any time.
Yes.
And conservatively, here in Nanaimo, 1 in 20 people are living with
huge number.
a brain. Huge number. It's bigger than if you combine breast cancer, multiple sclerosis, and HIV/AIDS combined. That's the incidence of brain injury. So brain injury can happen by a fall, a motor vehicle accident, an assault. Stroke is a brain injury, concussion is a brain injury. So brain injury, normal everyday life activities can lead to a brain injury. And you don't have to have hit your head or lost consciousness in order to experience a brain injury.
And I think
Um,
it's so important that we really talk about, because my
yes.
understanding of a brain injury was very much a concussion, you know, something you had a stress to the brain by a forced hit, whether it's a fall or otherwise, right? But that's not always the case. You pointed out stroke and other things too that can cause the injury. So what constitutes the brain injury?
Yeah, so acquired brain injury, which is the term that we use, means something that has happened to the brain, an injury that has happened to the brain, and it could be also an illness. It can be caused by meningitis or encephalitis, swelling to the brain. So something has happened to the brain after you were born, so not part of the birth process or not prior to being born. So that's what's defined as an acquired brain injury according to the World Health Organization. So as you said, Kathy, many times folks who have experienced a brain injury can look the same as they did prior to the injury from the outside. And yet they can understand that their brain is not functioning in the same way. And that is one of the hardest pieces, is that reckoning with your own identity. Who was I before the injury, and who am I now?
Yes. Yeah.
And that challenge for folks can often be missed, especially if they're they have a traumatic brain injury, a big injury that has a lot of wraparound with rehab and getting all, having a lot of support. And then once they go home and they're no longer in that structured medical support, what happens when they're looking to move forward with their life that looks very different? We call it, the new normal. What does the new normal look like? We have a client that, he had multiple brain injuries, and he said, one thing that he did to signify to his wife that he was different, because she had the same expectations of him, of what he could do prior to the injury. And it became, a real difficult part of their relationship, because he couldn't explain that I can't do that. I'm not the same person. So what he did was he grew a beard. He physically changed his physical appearance.
Wow.
Yeah, and that was a really great signal, or a really great way to say, I'm different now.
Yeah.
I'm not the same person. So he would look at himself, and his partner would look and see that beard and be like, okay, we've got to negotiate a new life together, a new normal. And so that was a great tip or trick. And he said,
It's an incredible
if
idea.
you've got your, change your hair, change something about your physicality if you look the same, so that it's a signal to you and your friends and family that this is the new you. There's a different way of being in the world, and how do we move forward from that place?
Such an incredibly simple idea, but so very, very impactful. I mean, I just, what a great piece of inspiration for someone who needs to show the difference in who they once were and who they are today. Is it possible for people to recover from a brain injury, or brain injuries? I understand traumatic could be a permanent situation, but are there, is there hope for someone to return back to perhaps the way they once were prior to the injury?
Recovery is a lifelong journey. They used to say that, after your injury, you had a 2-year window where recovery would happen, and you would plateau, and that's kind of as good as it's going to get. However, the new information that's coming out around neuroplasticity, the amazing way that the brain can rewire itself, so
Phenomenal.
that we have, the brain is such a complex and incredible organ that we really know so little about how it functions, and we're learning new things all the time. So with brain injury, um, every brain injury is different. Every person is unique. So we can't say that, like 100% recovery, you're going to be the same person as you were.
Yeah.
That's not realistic. However, learning happens. That's the layman's term, or the neuroplasticity is just another word for learning.
Yes.
And our brains learn and continue to learn until we are not here anymore.
What's
So,
interesting to me is that from studies that I read many, many years ago, and I know nothing, by the way, I'm being very, very clear. One of the reasons I love doing this show is because, experts like yourself can really educate our
oh my
community.
goodness, and I'm certainly not an expert.
Oh, I think you're pretty
I
darn.
am not an expert. I am simply here, and learning every day from people with lived experience. So.
Well, and the lived experience part I find the most fascinating, really, and how people are so nimble and able to adjust. But what I read years back was that we as humans really just use such a small fraction of our brain, and that we're really, from a knowledge perspective, as we develop as a humankind, perhaps we are learning more and utilizing it more. But to understand that really it's just a fraction of the brain that we actually use for cognitive thought or ability, and that there's so much more potential on left and right hemispheres.
Yeah, and I mean, there's some different information coming up around that, and what does that actually mean, and to use only a small percentage of, because our whole brain lights up,
Yes.
if we're looking at those different brain imaging. So there's more conversation around, how we use the brain, not necessarily what percentage, but how does the brain function, and how can the brain rewire and rework itself to regain function if it has been lost through a stroke or through a different brain injury. We see all sorts of incredible technology that
Mhm.
is being used now to stimulate different, like the stimulation on the tongue that all of a sudden lights up, the brain, where people can now do things like walk or talk or language, lighting up the brain in different ways so that we can regain some of that functionality
Wow.
that may have been lost. So it's incredible. We're living in an incredible time right now where there's so much function, so much focus on brain health and brain research. That's really quite exciting.
I agree with you. I've noticed as well in the last 4 or 5 years an incredible impact for knowledge about brain injury and mental health overall. I'm curious of whether or not Alzheimer's and dementia is considered to be a brain injury, or mental health. Is that considered to be a brain injury? Could you give us some insight on
Yeah, so those are really good questions, Kathy. And I think under the umbrella of neurological conditions and how the brain changes, all these things kind of fit. And sometimes it's useful to differentiate. Brain injury is not seen as a degenerative disease process. So that's what differentiates it from something like Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, MS, other neurological conditions. However, how someone experiences the world when their brain has, when there's loss of function or a change in functioning, can often be experienced or presented similarly under that umbrella of neurological conditions. So whether you are experiencing fatigue, memory loss, cognitive challenges, difficulties managing emotions, whether that was from a motor vehicle accident, a traumatic brain injury, or whether that's from a disease process, something like Alzheimer's or MS, you're still feeling that functionality and experiencing the world and experiencing the challenges living in the world from that place. So there's a lot of stigma that goes along with when our brains aren't functioning in a way that's quote unquote normal. So I had a young woman who came in, and she had had a concussion. She was a VIU student, and she had had a concussion and experienced prolonged concussion symptoms where she had lots of difficulty with lights. That can be a real challenge, noise stimulation, because the brain has to work really hard to filter out all that external stimulus and to focus. And she said she was, at a takeout restaurant, and she was at the counter ordering, and she was having difficulty focusing because of the fluorescent lights, because of all the stimulus. And so she's, trying to remember, okay, what am I ordering? And a lot of us have that
So hard.
experience.
Oh, for sure.
It's just too much.
Yeah.
And the person at the counter said, like, what's wrong? Are you slow?
Oh my gosh.
And this is a student who, was really very well accomplished, and it was so devastating
Oh,
to her. She sat in my office. She's like, I didn't know what to do
yes.
in that moment. And I thought, that's not your fault.
No. Oh my gosh.
Not your fault. This is our responsibility as a community, as a society. I don't care who you are or how you got there. If you're standing in front of me and I can see that there's a challenge, with my responsibility is to say, how can I help?
Yes.
Is there anything that would be helpful in this moment for you? Are you okay? So we see that the stigma and the judgment and the misunderstanding and the ignorance that surrounds brain injury, along with these other neurological conditions, and maybe we can include mental health in there. We know that trauma affects the functionality of the brain,
Indeed.
the physiology of the brain as well. So, it's a bigger conversation around how we embrace neurodiversity. We've worked really hard. People have worked really hard around looking at disability in terms of the physical and access to physical spaces. But I think our next hurdle, our next challenge is to really look at how do we embrace that neurodiversity and understand that for many different reasons, people are processing and accessing and interpreting information and thinking differently. And that's okay. Those differences are strengths that enrich our community rather than problems.
I couldn't agree with you more. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that the judgment piece is probably the one that needs the most attention at this point, particularly now. We're starting to recognize that we need each other in a way that we've never really connected with each other in the past. And if we have, it's so far removed from our memory banks. And certainly generationally, there is a difference between how we connect today and how we would have, 100 years ago or 80 years ago. Before we move further in the conversation, I just would like to welcome everyone who's listening to the program today. You are listening to Act3 Radio on CHLY 101.7. I'm Kathy Holmes. I am your host. Kix Citton. Did I get it right that time?
You got it.
I got it. Kix Citton is from the Nanaimo brain injury. And what we usually like to do at this time of the program is get you to take a moment to reach over to your paper and pen stash and have it nearby, because when we take our next a little bit of a break in conversation, we're going to be able to present with you ways to get in touch with Kix through Nanaimo brain injury. So please, as you're listening to the program, just make sure you have a paper and a pen at hand. Kix, we were kind of segueing into the new normal. I don't know if there ever was such a thing as normal anyway. I think it's so difficult to put what's normal for society, what's normal for us as individual, what's normal for family, what's normal in culture. I don't know if there ever is such a word. I think we really do need to find a new word for that. But part of it is that the dynamics of working with people and just being present with someone who may have experienced a brain injury, it's not, the the people are still the people. They're still core themselves, right? There is some challenges that have arisen from from the injury, but it's not that they're different people necessarily, right? It's maybe parts of them are different. How can we, as a community, whether you have an injury or not, how can we just be better as human beings? To look at individuals in the grocery lineup without judgment, just to be present with whoever you're with in that moment. Have you any thoughts around that?
Oh my goodness, Kathy, isn't that the question of our time?
Isn't it?
How can we be better humans to other humans? And we talked a little bit about the stigma and judgment for folks who have neurological challenges, mental health, whose brain functioning is not what we may be familiar with.
Yes.
And this is a huge piece, is to see diversity and to see difference as a strength that enriches my life, that enriches my community, rather than a problem and something to be feared, something to be hated, something to be fixed.
Yes.
That welcoming strangers, welcoming something that is different, is central to how we're going to move forward. So there's a great responsibility that we all have to listen, to understand when we are having a reaction.
Yep.
That we're going into that fight, flight, freeze reaction to something that is unfamiliar, and to be able to learn how to take a breath and calm down our own nervous systems and engage our own abilities to say, okay, there's some choice around here. How can I be a better human to this human in front of me? And so, and we all need that, right? At some point in our lives, we're not functioning. We may not be functioning in a way where we're our best selves in that moment. And hopefully, the person in front of us has enough awareness, enough skill, enough compassion to be able to turn up their own empathy to say, okay, this human in front of me looks like they're really having a challenge. How are you?
Yes.
How are you? So this ability to ask the question, we go to judgment really quickly, right? Like that's part of our makeup. We're, it's an evolutionary trait that our ancestors, we inherited, that we need to make quick judgments in order to keep ourselves safe, and that helped us survive. In prehistoric times, you needed to act quickly and move quickly, and we still have that functionality. We still have that ability in an emergency situation to go, okay, we need to move. However, when we are constantly in that triggered place of feeling like we are being threatened, that we are in danger, because we have a reaction to difference as something that is bad and wrong. That reaction is not what I think is going to be helpful or needed
Yes.
in these times.
Yes,
Right?
absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
whether our loved ones or whether we are living in the world from a place of having an experience of a brain injury and learning how to navigate through this world with that change in functionality, or whatever kind of um, situation that you're in, that you're moving through the world in a way that you're facing barriers, systematic barriers, conditioned barriers, all these pieces. This is a moment for us to take a breath and go, is this really a threat to me right now? Am I in danger? Is this person who is in front of me, maybe their behavior is not familiar to me, it's erratic, it's unpredictable. That can feel really scary.
Absolutely, it can.
You know, and it can be scary for the person who is in that situation where they don't feel like they have control over their emotions, or that their impulse control is challenged, which can be an effect of brain injury. That can be really scary for the person as well, to know that they are not they may not have the self-awareness that this is connected to their brain injury, and they may not have the ability in that moment, depending on how their brain is affected, to be able to put the brakes on. Our brain is, the function of the brain is much more of an inhibitory organ. It puts the brakes on things. And when the brain has been injured and that functionality of being able to put the brakes on is not working as well as what we expect it to be, it can be really, really challenging for the person and for the people around that person. But that understanding and empathy and that awareness, and I'm so glad that we're talking about this because we can raise that awareness. We're not going around and diagnosing everybody with a brain injury. This is not what we're trying to do.
Not at all.
However, we know that the incidence of brain injury is very high in our community. So, and we can't see it, as you say, it's an invisible piece. We know that from the research, over 50% of the homeless population had a brain injury prior to becoming homeless.
Yes. Yeah. And
And
that's so
so
lost in the conversation so
it's
often. It's
so lost in that
assumption.
conversation.
Yes. The assumption that these are drug addicts and they just haven't got the will to, get a job. And when I hear the voices that are attached to the homeless population, recognizing that there have been studies showing how many persons are persons of disability, persons of brain injury, and they are completely negated.
Mhm.
I do want to also point out, because I agree with everything that you just said, I think that the hard part for us is, or not for us, for people in general, is that they are not necessarily self-aware. They may not realize that they are in fear of this person that is in front of them, or feel threatened by this person. They might not be able to take notice that that's why that they are in physical reaction. And I think that it's really important for people to recognize that it's our individual responsibility to become more self-aware of ourselves and the way that we view the world, the way that we understand the world, and the way that we work with people, not only from a professional standpoint, but from a personal standpoint. How do we interact with those around us? There are loads of people that have no empathy, that have no compassion for anything that is outside of their circle of influence. And there are many, many others that are on the other end of the scale that are so overly fantastic and so compassionate, so self-aware. And thank goodness that there is such a balance of all kinds of people in the world to make this world go around. But wouldn't it be great if we could take that teaching and make that fit for every single person and every instance in dealing with another human? instead of it being, okay, well, this, I will treat this particular diagnostic one way, and that diagnostic another way, and that culture another way, and that faith another way. Couldn't we just let go of all of that and be aware that we are not necessarily as self-aware as we think we are, and be okay with that, right? Like, to really pay
This,
attention to that. Yeah,
this is the job in my mind of being human, of
yes,
evolving out of ignorance. And in order to evolve out of ignorance, one must acknowledge the ignorance
exactly.
there. And sometimes that's very difficult and very painful, to say, like, I got this wrong.
Yeah,
It's hugely courageous to be able to say that, and to express that vulnerability, and to say, but I'm not here, as Brene Brown would say, I'm not here to be right, I'm here to get it right.
that's right.
And so that's part of our work as the Brain Injury Society, is to share stories and to give voice to the people in our community living with acquired brain injury, affected by acquired brain injury, and to stand in awe of what they carry and how they are able to cope and move forward with their lives, rather than stand in judgment. This is the difference. Can we look at someone and ourselves, like starting with ourselves,
Yeah,
and to say, all the challenges and all the burdens and the conditioning and everything that we carry, I stand in awe of the fact that you are still moving forward one step at a time.
no kidding.
It's amazing that you're still here. And it's something that, I've had the experience of sitting down in my office with someone who comes through the door, and to, just to give space, physical and social space for belonging, to say, you belong here.
You matter.
You matter.
You matter.
And that this is an opportunity for all of us to sit in a place of possibility and listening before jumping to problem solving, because we want to fix it, right? This is really uncomfortable. We
Yeah.
want to fix it. I think prior to that, it's really important for us to listen. And that is one key role that our peer support volunteers offer, as something that they can offer that no one else can, unless you've had that experience. So our peer support volunteers, prior to COVID, but they're doing an amazing job transitioning onto Zoom and video conferencing, to learn how to offer that kind of peer connection to folks who are maybe newly affected, or have never had a conversation with someone who's had a similar experience with brain injury. And it is transformative
Oh, no kidding.
for someone to feel heard, and for someone to be able to express their challenges and to experience empathy and understanding and connection. So our peer support volunteers are key. They're key members of that healing journey, on that journey of recovery. And we're so proud of them, because through their generosity and their compassion and their courage to go back into the story, they've come far enough so that their story is now, can be held as a teaching story, as a gift, rather than a place of pain. And they're willing to come back and say, I see you. and I've been in that hospital bed. How are you doing? Because I know it's hard. I know it's hard right now. I have so much respect and love for our peer support volunteers and the peer volunteers that are out there in the community, either working, you know, with mental health or with seniors. Like, peers are the the greatest strength that we have in our community right now. We see it all over the place. People coming back, people with lived experience saying, I want to help. I need to be a part of this conversation. It can't just come from, you know, the bureaucracy or the top down. It has to come from lived experience. So I'm so proud of our peer support volunteers.
Well, what I love about peer support overall is you're quite poignant in you know, having these people be present and to really listen from a place of understanding, because no one, you're right, who hasn't experienced some of the challenges, regardless of what it is, peer on peer support has such an empowering life giving force to it that you cannot get in any other way. I couldn't agree with you more. Hey, everybody, thanks for tuning in to Act 3 today. You are listening to Kix Citton and myself. I'm Kathy Holmes for CHLY 101.7. And we are talking about Nanaimo brain injury today, Nanaimo Brain Injury Society and persons with brain injuries. We asked you at the break to grab a pen and a pencil. So I'm going to see if Kix can share the telephone number. You know, I don't know, with COVID, have you opened your facility again, your offices, or maybe you can give us some understanding of what that looks like, provide some website and some contact information.
Mm-hmm. So we, interesting piece is that during COVID, so we did, we made that decision in March when everything was closing down to close our physical doors to our office, but keep our hearts and our minds and our phone lines open. So we've been providing support over the phones and through video conferencing for clients and volunteers. And we've created some online education, some great presentations on coping with stress.
Oh,
Yeah, oh my goodness. Dr. Nancy Reeves, who's a psychologist who works with folks with brain injury, and she did this specifically for people with brain injury and also caregivers. There's great resources that we were able to develop and put out there quickly, and people can find that on our website, which is www.nbis.ca. So that stands for Nanaimo Brain Injury Society, nbis.ca.
I love how easy that is. I have to say, I love how easy that is. Some of the websites are so hard, but yours is nice and simple.
nbis.ca. Please go on to our website. We have COVID resources there. We have all our presentations, our contact information, our programs, things, whatever's happening. Lots of great information around Brain Injury Awareness Month. Links and resources, so please visit our website. And if anyone has either experienced a brain injury themselves, knows somebody who could use some support, or is a caregiver or family member, please reach out to us. Our direct helpline is 250-268-3959. I'm going to repeat that. 250-268-3959. Call or text. So you can call or text our helpline, and you'll, you know, if that is, please leave a message. But that's the way to get the direct support through our community navigator program. You know, when we're in places where we can feel lost or don't know what the next step is, we need a navigator. We need somebody to help us find a way. So that's what Nanaimo Brain Injury Society is here for. We walk with the person, we accompany that person whether that's for 20 minutes over the phone or whether that's for 20 years. We're celebrating one of our volunteers who's been with our society for 20 years.
Wow.
And yeah, shout out to Daryl Viney.
Way to go, Daryl Viney.
He is so fantastic. We highlighted Daryl's story in our newsletter, and he came as a client and has been a volunteer for us for many, many, many years. And so, we're here for as long as you need us. And so we're really pleased to be able to walk and accompany people in that way on this journey.
I love how you word that. It's the walking with. You're walking with someone on a journey. And I think that some of these journeys that we take in this life are really in need of a incredible peer support. And if you have a brain injury, it is important that you reach out. And a lot of people, 1 in 20 in our community, when you said that at the beginning of the hour, Kix, I was just, I'm floored by that. And what I'm really wondering now, and we don't have a long time left in our conversation today. We do have a few more minutes, but I'm curious about people with acquired brain injury and how they're managing during COVID. Can you give us some feedback on that? I'm particularly concerned about the domestic, intimate partner violence piece that often is associated with brain injury. It is a very under-discussed conversation. Can you share some insight on that with us today?
Yes. So we know we've been hearing with COVID the increased concern around domestic violence, that home is not necessarily a safe place for many of our brothers and sisters in community. And there are two issues that we've looked at, is that the intimate partner violence, internationally, 1 in 3 women report experiencing partner violence. That's a huge, huge
phenomenal
number.
Numbers. Yeah, absolutely.
And 95% of those reports are reports of being hit in the head. So the possibility of concussion and brain injury with intimate partner violence is huge. And then we can also look at, so that's one place of grave concern, because those incidents often go unreported. They are maybe undiagnosed or misdiagnosed. So intimate partner violence is a great concern right now in terms of the potential for brain injury or untreated brain injury that's going on. Another side of that is that we know that seniors are also vulnerable at this time in terms of domestic violence, either through a paid or family caregiver. That elder abuse is also a real concern at this time, and that patterns of abuse that last over a long period of time can really heighten the potential for brain injury. And if you have a brain injury, another, like a concussion on top of a concussion, or a brain injury on top of a brain injury before the first injury has the appropriate time to heal, that can really cause significant health concerns, including fatalities. So this is a real concern and worry for us, because for older adults as well, that symptoms of a brain injury may be confused with mental health issues, or potentially be confused with a substance abuse presentation, or presents, what could be shuffled under quote unquote normal aging.
Right.
So that seniors are very vulnerable, older adults are vulnerable to the undiagnosed or misdiagnosed brain injury at this time, with that heightened potential for elder abuse. So we're very, very confused, very concerned about that. And so, one thing that we hope that people learn is that brain injury does not have to happen with a direct blow to the head. It does, for older adults as well, for anybody. But you know, any kind of shoving or a fall, you may have a fall and you've broken a bone, a hip. That gets a lot of attention, of course, because that's a major concern. However, we need to understand that something may have happened with the brain as well with that force. The brain is like a unset jello inside a bony skull. So when it gets moved from side to side or shuffled, you know, back and forth, that your brain continues to move even if your head stops. So it has the opportunity to kind of slosh up against the side of your skull or have that diffuse movement, and there can be injury there that doesn't show up on the CAT scan or the MRI.
So Kix, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
Yeah.
with what you've just said, you've kind of caught me with something too that I'm curious about. As we get older, for men and women, our bones become so much more brittle, right? Our body becomes, as it does its natural, I hate to say disintegration process, but that's really what it is, right? Does the brain likewise have that same kind of fragility to it as it gets older?
That's, you know, that's a good question, and there's lots of different factors into how the brain ages, and
Yeah,
that our brain is constantly like our bodies, our brain is aging as well, and
sure.
how that affects our functionality. So all the things that we do to keep ourselves, our physical bodies healthy, well, that affects how our brain ages as well. So we want to make sure that we're getting enough sleep, getting exercise, proper eating, all these things, so that our brain has the best opportunity to stay healthy for as long as possible. And that includes, you know, giving it lots of, giving it the quote unquote exercise, reading, crossword puzzles,
Oh,
music, social interactions, all those things that really help us stay healthy
mhm.
as whole human beings. But I do just want to get back a little bit to for just in terms of older adults, and specifically around concussions, because that can be missed. If someone has a bigger traumatic brain injury, of course, there's a lot of wraparound around that. But if someone goes into the hospital or has an incident and it's not specifically to the head, like head trauma,
Mhm.
that a concussion can be easily missed. So we really want to make sure that there's always screening for concussion, even if there is no direct blow to the head. If someone has had a fall, and fall is the most common cause of a brain injury, and we know that you know, 50% of all falls reported are age 65 and older. So as we get older, falls become more of an issue for us. So if there has been a fall, even if the head was not directly affected, we need to make sure that the medical provider is screening for concussion. That's looking at the physical, the cognitive, as well as the mental, emotional effects. And that means understanding who this person was before
Mhm.
and how they are different, to understand the difference in usual activities and abilities. So I'll give my mom as an example. She was in a car accident, and I have her permission to tell the story. She's in her 70s. She was in a car accident. Her shoulder took the brunt of the impact. So there's a lot of focus on rehabbing the shoulder and getting her that. But 6 months after, I was talking with her, and she's like, you know, I've got these headaches, and the lights are really affecting me, and I can't, you know, I can't focus as much. Like, I said, Mom, did they ever talk about the potential for concussion? Like, I think that you may want to ask your doctor about concussion. And she said, no, they didn't say anything about concussion. And I said, I think we need to make sure that you get checked out. So as an advocate,
Of
you
course.
know, and she's not here in Nanaimo, she's on the mainland. So I looked under concussion clinics and the Fraser Health concussion clinics. I'm like, hey, you need this referral form. You need to go to your doctor. This is what you're going to say. And English is not my mom's first language. So there's another barrier there.
Mm-hmm.
But the doctor filled out the referral form. And I said, well, Mom, what did the doctor say? And when you asked him if you had a concussion, he said, oh yeah, you've got a concussion, but there's nothing you can do.
Oh my goodness.
And I just thought, oh my gosh, this is
So
horrible.
uninformed.
So here's this woman
Oh,
experiencing these symptoms that are very confusing and very debilitating. And her doctor is of that mind that you got your bell rung and there's nothing you can do, and you know, like, or we'll stick you in a dark room. Like, it just, I was so angry.
would be
I'm like, no,
terrified.
okay, you got that referral, you need to go to the concussion clinic, you need to get proper screening so that you can do everything you can do so that you don't get a second concussion. You know, there's an injury there. If you had, just same with your shoulder, you're going to take care of that injury so it doesn't get further injured, right? Brain is the same way. We want to make sure that we're giving it the best possible chance to recover, you know, as much functionality as we can get to. May not be the same like your shoulder may not function the same as it did, but we're going to work towards as much functionality and pain management. Same with the brain, but because it's invisible, it doesn't get that same attention. And
Well, it's the attention piece that we need to honor with this month being Brain Injury Month, for people to get a little bit more information and a little bit more background. Kix, unfortunately, we've got just a minute or two left at the top. And I really, you know, we always love to end the show with that piece of wisdom. What, you know, if you could give a takeaway to our audience about your experiences and the experiences of those you've worked with, what would be your teaching?
thank you, Kathy. I think that's such a wonderful question to land on. For me, again, I'm coming back to this idea to stand in awe of the challenges that people face every day, to stand in awe of the vulnerability and courage and resilience that people summon every day instead of judgment. That to me is really a piece that I'm holding for myself these days, and hopefully we can stand in awe a little bit more.
You, my friend, are an incredibly good human. What a treat it has been to have you on the program today. Thank you so much. Kix, one more time, can you give out the information? How can people reach you?
Thanks, Kathy. Yes, and you are a very good human too. Like we're learning, right? We're learning how to be good humans.
A moment at a time.
So please reach out to the Nanaimo Brain Injury Society. Our services are free. We're supported by donations and grants and the support of our community. So we're always looking forward to you know, connecting with volunteers and donors and our wonderful clients and our wonderful community. But please reach out. We're at nbis.ca. That's our website. And our direct line is 250-268-3959. Call or text.
Thanks again, Kix. Kix, do you have Facebook presence as well, or Instagram presence?
We do. Oh my goodness.
There we go. We got to throw that out.
I know. Oh boy. Yes, we're on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and YouTube. So Nanaimo Brain Injury Society. We have a lot going on Facebook these days because of Brain Injury Awareness Month. So please follow us on Facebook. We've got a contest. We got contests going on with prizes and just to raise awareness of brain injury. and to really celebrate and share the voices of people with lived experience. So yeah, thanks, Kathy.
My pleasure. So join everybody, join the Facebook page today. Hey, listen, you have been participating in today's episode of Act 3 on CHLY 101.7. Join us again next week at 1 o'clock, as we always have incredible guests. Thank you so much, Kix from the Nanaimo Brain Injury Society. We're so glad that you came. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.